Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hey everybody, Tom Woods here. It's episode 2611 of The Tom Woods Show. We have Scott Horton of the Libertarian Institute with us. I'm not in my usual place. We're actually both in the same hotel right now, but I didn't bring equipment for us to be recording together. We're getting ready to go on board the Tom Woods cruise, which I told you was going to be a great time. And for some reason, you're sitting home watching the Tom Woods Show. But all the same, we're going to talk today about, obviously the Ukraine situation, but there's a lot of current stuff to talk about. And Scott has literally written the book on the subject. And I want to talk to him about it. Of course, we're talking about Scott Horton, who is the, is it executive director of the Libertarian Institute?
Just director.
Director of the Libertarian, you should call yourself executive director, but director of the Libertarian Institute, a million other things. Give everybody the full title of, hold on a minute. I have Provoked here in the hotel room, but I can't reach it from where I am. Jen is getting up to get it for me, so I can hold it up for the audience. So you tell us the subtitle. Provoked is the title.
That's right. How Washington started the new Cold War with Russia and the catastrophe in Ukraine.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, that I was thanking her and you for giving us the subtitle. All right, so let's actually go immediately to current events.
Okay.
So there's obviously some effort to wind the war down, and we have American and Russian, what would you say, diplomats meeting with each other, talking about this. And of course, this has sent people into hysterics. And we have Trump speaking, let's say, not very kindly about Zelensky all of a sudden, which is a kind of a new thing. So there's a lot going on. J.D. Vance has been very pugnacious on so-called X about this with numerous people. Neil Ferguson, your friend, among them. I don't know if you've seen that, but there's a thread involving the two of them. And I think J.D. Vance on this topic anyway has actually been pretty good. So what do you make of all this?
Well, I'm really thrilled to see that Trump seems to be living up to his promise here. I did believe him on this one, that he really meant to end this war and that he doesn't really see the mileage in great power conflict with Russia at all. China is still up in the air, although he's said contradictory things about that as well. But he clearly just thought that Biden's policy toward Russia was the absolute worst and was right about that. So, as far as his statements about Zelensky, of course, Trump is always hyperbolic no matter what he's saying. In this case, he, got out a little over his skis on some of the facts, but it doesn't really matter. He's trending all in the right direction. And according to Vance, some of that was a reaction to he and Rubio didn't like it when they met with Zelensky and talked about some things. And then he came out and, according to Vance, mischaracterized their conversation and so forth. And then he insulted Trump and said Trump was listening to disinformation about the situation and stuff. So that kind of made them angry and created a little bit of backlash there, apparently. Now, I should say, Tom, because this is really an important thing, that, this is Trump at his best, but he ain't Ron Paul and he ain't even Rand Paul. And so he has this whole extortion thing built in where he wants, mineral rights. And I guess that would include, to their grain and everything too, which, in the Obama years, they already turned over a lot of their fields to ADM and Monsanto and Cargill and other big agribusiness firms, back 10 years ago. But then, and Chevron and some of the other interests, looking to develop shale oil in the far east of the country, which is now out of their hands anyway. But so then there are like these rare earth minerals that are supposedly worth a lot. I was reading a thing that was saying actually the market's crashed in a lot of these things, saying, oh, we need all this lithium. But they just found a giant thread of lithium in Utah or Nevada or somewhere. And there's just all kinds of stuff everywhere. So they really don't need these so-called rare earths that much in the first place. And it's just sort of blatant imperialism, nationalist imperialism, rather than non-interventionism. So it's a different and policy to the right of the typical W. Bush, Joe Biden, globalism of the last 30 years, but it's a turn that's, in a negative way as well. And, Marco Rubio said in an interview that the whole deal with the mineral, what is obvious, just extortion, the mineral deal that they're trying to strong arm Ukraine into signing here. Rubio said that this is to create a joint venture to essentially force the American people to have a long-term vested interest in Ukraine. He said, think of it as a security guarantee, keeping America involved there. Well, that's exactly what we don't want. We don't need those minerals, and we don't need to steal that grain. If it was just a free market, Tom, in a free trade world, and we didn't have this world empire starting all this trouble, and the government of Ukraine wanted to make a deal with Cargill for some grain or whatever it is, I guess that'd be none of my business. But this is just kind of blatant imperialism. It's the exact kind of thing that we should not be doing. So it's great that they're ending the war, that they recognize that Russia has taken as much land as they've taken, and they're not giving up any of it. And it's a matter of stopping now while Ukraine is only so far behind as far as their war with Russia goes. And I think Trump has indicated he's willing to just drop all the sanctions and drop everything and try to just get along and pretend this whole thing never happened as far as America's, Washington's relationship with Moscow. I don't know how far they're willing to go to do that. And that, of course, is by far the most important thing. America's relationship with Russia is really, if you think about it, it's the only thing that matters in the world. Nothing else matters in the world. Like, not even our relationship with China. I mean, China could, and America could have a serious nuclear war as well. But a real general thermonuclear war with Russia would be beyond anyone's comprehension in terms of the level of catastrophe. It would be the end of all northern civilization on the planet Earth and the death of billions of people to nuclear winter and starvation. And it would be, the living would envy the dead in every way. So keeping America, and that doesn't mean we have to bow down and do whatever they say, but it means that we should definitely not be picking unnecessary conflicts with them, which is what's happened here.
I wonder about if you have the same impression of Marco Rubio that I do, that, 3 months ago, I thought, oh my gosh, how could you even consider appointing him? And I still think that way. But I've realized, but maybe the very fact that he's kind of an empty vessel means you can fill him up with anything you want, and he'll do that.
The job of Secretary of State or Defense or whatever is to do what the president says, right? So if Rubio understands that that's his job, he's not here to, like so many characters in Trump's administration in his first term, were there to undermine him. James Mattis and Rex Tillerson and his whole National Security Council, McMaster, all these people, their job was to prevent Trump from being the president the last time around. So I don't know how the conversation went here, but it should have been. Now listen, Marco, you want this job. Your job is to do what I say and not get creative and find a loophole and screw me over, pal. And so I don't know exactly how he's done it, but I hope that's what he said. I'd like to mention this one, Tom, is because it's just unbelievable to me. And again, if I could be a fly on the wall, I would just have loved it. But somehow Trump got Zalmay Khalilzad, who was the sort of pet Muslim neoconservative. I mean, he did study under Leo Strauss with Bill Kristol and all those guys back in that era at the University of Chicago. So he's considered to be a legitimate card-carrying neoconservative from that set, from Scoop Jackson's office. He actually wrote the defense planning guidance under Paul Wolfowitz in 1992 that laid out the blueprint for empire. He's an extremely important guy in neoconservative circles, was on W. Bush's National Security Council. Somehow, point is, somehow Trump got him to promise that he would make a deal with the Taliban to get us out of that war, and not to wait Trump out and hopefully he'd only do 4 years and then we'd be able to stay and find some loophole and screw around. But no, like somehow, I don't know if Trump made him cut his hand and shake on it or what, but he made him really promise and really mean it that we're going to cut out Kabul. They have no say in this, and we're going to make a deal with the Taliban, and we're going to leave that country. And of course, Biden, botched the dismount and everything, as everybody knows, because he prolonged it. He kicked the can down the road 4 months and ruined everything. But Khalilzad made a real good deal with the Taliban on Trump's behalf in a way that I just could have never predicted, Tom. I would have told you Khalil Zad's going to find a way to screw this up for us, and he didn't. Trump made him promise, apparently, and he lived up to it. So if Trump is handling his staff that way, that like, look, the job is to do the job I want you to do, not you're here to represent the man against my interests, then I could see, as you're saying, that Rubio is essentially following his orders and doing what's expected of him. But of course, where he's coming from is the very worst place on everything. So when it comes to his turn to give the boss advice, it's almost going to always be bad advice. Pretty much no question about that.
If you're tired of the Fed being in control of your finances, Monetary Metals is revolutionizing how you can grow your wealth outside the system and gain greater control of your finances by growing your gold in ounces every single month. With Monetary Metals' gold leasing program, clients can earn 3% annual interest on their gold, paid every single month in more ounces of physical gold. Gold prices broke all-time highs in 2024, and now you can get your gold to work for you, generating additional interest income every month. The interest you earn is paid in ounces of physical gold or silver, which you get in addition to any price appreciation from gold and silver during the year. Join thousands of investors who are already earning interest income every month paid in gold and silver. All Woods here is one of them. This is a no-brainer for gold owners. Now is the time to secure your wealth and build your legacy in an asset that the government can't inflate away. The Fed can print dollars, they can't print gold. Now's the time for you to start growing your wealth in ounces. Go to monetary-metals.com/woods to learn more. That's monetary-metals.com/woods. Let's get to what's probably the big, or one of the big questions on everybody's minds, and that involves what the terms might wind up being now in 2025, as opposed to had Joe Biden been interested in diplomacy in 2022, what the outcome might have been.
Yeah. Well, first of all, they could have just prevented the war. It really didn't have to happen at all if they had been honest about negotiating a new treaty and implementing the Minsk II deal and the rest.
Oh, and can you stop for a minute? Because everybody talks about Minsk II in all these contexts, but most people don't know what that is.
Okay. So the real war started in 2014 when America overthrew the government there with the help of some local Nazi thugs on the ground who did the final putsch and overthrew the president in February of 2014. The Russians then took the Crimean Peninsula and some of their friends occupied government buildings in the east, and eventually including some Russian assets helping to lead them. And they seized government buildings in the east, and then the new Kiev regime declared war against them. And we know that John Brennan, Obama sent John Brennan, the head of the CIA, to Kiev to order them to begin the war. USA Today and Forbes both covered it, that he was there, and he went there April the 12th, and they launched the war on the 14th. And we know from Zach Dorfman and from also then the New York Times didn't give him any credit, but they should have, because last year they did an in-depth report that verified all of Zach Dorfman's reporting and then some about the absolute heavy presence of CIA in that country, beginning right after the coup at the very least. And so it was really America's war all along. And in the first year of it, about 9,000 people were killed. The Russians intervened outright in August of 14, and that really forced Kiev and Berlin really to the table to sign Minsk I, which was, that's the city in Belarus where they met and signed the deal. And that restricted the war to lower level fighting. In other words, calling off any airstrikes and heavy artillery, and trying to make a new gray zone kind of dividing line. And so it was supposed to end the war. It didn't end it, but it certainly reduced the level of violence to what they call low-level warfare, although it didn't really take. And they had another major battle in February of 2015. And at that point, they went back to Minsk and they signed Minsk II, which was essentially just, further developing the same peace deal. And what it required essentially was a special status of extra sovereignty for Eastern Ukraine. In other words, strong federalism. So they weren't really seceding from the Union. They were staying part of the country, but it was, something like Texas to Washington is what they were asking for the Constitution to be amended to allow for that. And then they were going to hold new elections and all these things. But Kiev wouldn't amend the Constitution and wouldn't let them hold elections until after they had control of the entire eastern border of the country, which, in other words, until the eastern side, the so-called rebel side, absolutely gives up the entire field to their control first. And only then would they abide by the rest of the deal. And everybody knew they were violating it. And they admit now, Tom, all of them, Poroshenko and Zelensky and Angela Merkel and Francois Hollande and all of these people.
It was just to buy time.
It was just to buy time so that America could build up the Ukrainian military. They never meant to implement it. They said that they thought the war was going to get worse anyway, so might as well prepare for that. That was their plan all along, they said. So that was the Minsk II deal. And by the way, I don't know if Trump knew about this or not. Well, I don't know. I mean, he was responsible, but his ambassador, William Taylor, told Zelensky when he was first elected in 2019 to tear up what was called the Steinmeier formula, which was the German foreign minister had proposed essentially a new order of operations for implementing the Minsk deal that hopefully all sides could agree on. And the Nazis out in the streets said no to capitulation. If he does this, we'll hang him from a tree on the main drag in Kiev, they said. And in Washington, or in Kiev, the ambassador disparaged the deal and told Zelensky not to sign it, just like Ambassador Zimmerman helped ruin the Lisbon deal that could have prevented the war in Bosnia back in 1992. And this is something that the Americans do from time to time, is ruin a peace deal when they could have one. And so I don't know if Trump was in on that or not. His own government said that he was like the captain of a ship holding the wheel, but it's not attached to anything. And so, that was part of the history of his last presidency. And he also increased arms sales to Ukraine. He was, remember, impeached for holding up an arms sale for a day or two. They literally impeached him for the third time in American history. A president was impeached for holding up an arms deal to Ukraine. That was actually far beyond what Obama was willing to do. But anyway, that was that's a tangent and a side issue. But so that's the Minsk deal, Tom. Is the point is, if they had ever implemented the thing, this war never would have really happened. And the major two provocations for the war are the unsettled dispute in the Donbass and the ongoing so-called low-level civil war. I think I said approximately 9,000 people were killed in the first year, but approximately another 4,000 people were killed in the years after that, the 7 years after that, leading up to 2022. And then, of course, the issue of Ukraine's eventual membership into NATO, which Biden refused to negotiate. And everybody knew, he was on the record saying, we're not bringing Ukraine into NATO, don't be stupid. But the Russians can't tell us that we're not bringing Ukraine into NATO. And that is a principle we are willing to have Ukraine go to war with Russia over, is the open door policy that says only we can say who can't join our alliance. And by the way, we're willing to say that. But anyway, Putin can't, and we absolutely refuse to negotiate with him and put it in writing in a deal with him. And so that was the origin of the war back in 2022, 3 years ago.
I can't help noticing, Scott, that you are wearing a Libertarian Institute hoodie as you and I talk here. So let us pause in our discussion for a minute to say a word about the Libertarian Institute. Then I want to jump right back in. The Libertarian Institute made it possible for me to publish my book, Diary of a Psychosis, about COVID, painlessly, and a very beautiful edition, great cover, great editorial work. Really a fantastic job that you guys did bring that thing out in just record time. And you've been producing books of exceptional quality. And, you're promoting really, really good analysis and content and multimedia. I keep telling people, you donate to a lot of these nonprofits, and you don't know if the CEO is driving around in a limousine with the proceeds of your money. But that I have been to your house, I've been out on your boat, and I know that you ain't riding no limousine. So tell everybody about the Libertarian Institute for a minute.
Sure. But yes, it is true. My truck is 30 years old this year. It's a little Nissan D21. And my boat I got for $1,000 off Craigslist in 2015. And I've put a couple thousand into it since then, but it's just a little old 1984 bow rider. Geez, I can't believe I mispronounced that. And so, yeah, we have a lot of fun out there. But so, yes, it's all bang for your buck. All the money that you guys donate, well, a little bit goes to me, but most of it all goes to my guys. And that is for their regular articles and shows that they produce for us. And then, of course, the editorial team that puts out our books. And we just put out our 16th book, Tom, which is by Joe Solis Mullen, who's a credentialed Austrian school economist and professor. And it's called The National Debt and You. And it's all about what you need to know about the national debt. It's a nice little monograph there. Nice kind of counterweight to Provoked, the behemoth there. We have the absolute best guy on Syria in the world is William Van Wagenet, and he is our guy. We've published tons of his extremely long-form articles about the history of Obama's dirty war in Syria 10 years ago. And we were about to publish it when al-Qaeda took over Damascus, and he went back there to write one more chapter of his book before we put that out. But that'll be coming out soon. And then, look, we got Bovard. We've got that's James Bovard, the most successful American libertarian journalist ever, who's a regular now at the New York Post as well. We've got Sheldon Richman, the libertarian legend, and Lori Calhoun, the brilliant analyst and author of great books also about COVID. We published her book about COVID, Questioning the COVID Company Line, which is all her essays that she wrote for the Institute in real time in 2020 and 21 for us. Absolute top of the line stuff, right up there with yours. And then we got William Bupert, who's a former Army infantryman and military intelligence officer, who's a brilliant historian of American military folly. We've got the whole new generation of young guys, Keith Knight, Connor Freeman, Kyle Anzalone, Hunter Durensis, and all of those guys, of course, our good friend Tommy Salmons. And we're bringing on more and more writers all the time. We're publishing Jose Nino now, and the great Brad Pierce, who's one of the most brilliant foreign policy analysts in America today. He just writes the greatest stuff. And so, yeah, we're just rocking and rolling over there, man. It's libertarianinstitute.org. I like to think that we're, right up there as, we're kind of new, but I like to think right up there near the Independent Institute and the Mises Institute and the cream of the crop of the libertarian movement. I know we got a lot of really great guys. I'm proud of all the great work that they're doing. And all we need is tens of thousands of dollars from wealthy libertarians out there. We all understand the marginal revolution. It says the more tens of thousands of dollars you got, the less any one unit of tens of thousands of dollars matters to you. And so you can afford to just part with them and give them to me, and I will treasure them and pay Keith Knight to keep doing great work with that money. So that's my pitch for the Institute. 16 books and counting, and many more coming. And that's libertarianinstitute.org/donate. And thank you all very much.
I couldn't endorse that more. I sit on the board. I couldn't be more enthusiastic about what Scott's doing and the whole team over at the Libertarian Institute. So definitely do that. Okay. Now I feel like this is like a PBS thing. Like we have this great content, and then we pause for
Jerry Lewis special.
Pass the basket around.
That's great.
What do you make of this whole? I can understand it if I were Zelensky, but his complaint that I just cannot allow decisions to be made about the Ukraine's future, about the fate of Ukraine, without Ukraine present at these talks. Well, what would you say about that?
Well, in a sense, he's right that America doesn't have the right to negotiate on his behalf and call ceasefire for Kiev. If they want to keep fighting, good luck, pal. But the point is, just like with Afghanistan, that, Kabul and Kiev, they have an interest in keeping the war going and keeping America involved. And so it's not in their interest to sit down and negotiate a quick end of the war, at least as a political government, right? This is public choice theory. We're not talking about what's good for the country. We're talking about what's good for the regime. And so what's good for the regime is to keep America involved by dragging out the talks. We saw the same kind of thing in Vietnam. And so Trump, I think, has learned the lesson from dealing with the Taliban that just forget Kabul. You guys aren't included. We're going to make the deal that we're going to make. And it's a deal for us to quit. So, Kiev's sovereign territory as it existed, previously, even officially up until 2022, in the state of the Civil War, they hadn't the East hadn't completely seceded from the Union entirely at that point. So, having their sovereign territory invaded, Kiev has the right under international law and whatever, if you believe in state power, to fight wars and whatever. I mean, we can all libertarian head on a dance on the head of a pin thing, but just all other things being equal, Kiev have the right to hang in the war and ask the French and the Germans and the British and the Poles to give them equipment and men and money and keep fighting. Sure. Good luck to them. I think, the role of Donald Trump here should be to negotiate America's exit from the entire conflict. And if he can talk sense to Kiev that they're better off quitting now while they're only this far behind, then he should do that, especially if he's telling them, the hard truth is we're not sending you more money and weapons. We don't want this fight. That was the last government, not this one, and we're not doing this. Then, hopefully they see reason there. From my point of view, being sympathetic to the Ukrainian side, in a sense, I would hate to see them lose Kharkiv and Odessa, which are the two major prizes left. I don't think the Russians want to take Kiev, but I think they might want to take Kharkiv and Odessa. And if the war continues too much longer, it could be the case, as many anti-war forces have been predicting for a long time, that Ukraine's military will just be ground up and break. Daniel L. Davis thinks that they are just, on their very last legs. And at some point, when the Russians are done essentially just smashing their army and destroy it, then they can walk around and go wherever they want. Now, in Odessa, there's tunnels underneath that city. And so they might have a tough insurgency there to fight, even if the Ukrainian military breaks. Remember, Tom, if you go back to the beginning of the war, the CIA official assessment and the White House believed and the Brits believed and everybody thought that the Russians were going to smash the Ukrainian military and have their way with the country. The question was whether they would go west of the river, the major river there, the Dnieper, or not. But then the idea was we were going to support the Nazis like the Mujahideen. Dmitry Yarosh and Andrei Belitsky, and these guys were going to be the Abdul Azam and Osama bin Laden of this new jihad, led by these neo-Nazis from the OUN UPA and Azov Battalion and so forth, to fight against the Russians. So that still is a future possibility. If the Poles and the French and the Germans and whoever want to continue to back Ukraine, even after their army is smashed, they could still fight insurgency from the West. Ukraine is the size of Texas. And for people who understand what that means, they understand what that means. It's humongous. Just like Afghanistan, it's a huge country. And now a lot of it is just kind of barren steppe, but there's some forests and some swamps, and there's some places to fight insurgency from as well. And so they'd be fools to carry on like that. When they have America ready to drop out, they should probably be trying to get America to represent them as best as they can to hold on to as much territory as they possibly can for the future here. I would think that that's their best bet. I don't know if they agree. And I'm not sure whether Trump is telling them, I insist you quit and I'm negotiating on your behalf, or whether he's just saying, hey, listen, we're Audi 5000. You guys are going to have to figure it out yourself.
Your old friend Woods here is about to save you a bundle. I'd like to tell you about my friends at Federated Computer, who are changing the way businesses buy software. We all need software to run our business, but the best business software doesn't have to cost thousands of dollars each month. The typical Federated Computer customer saves 75% or more on their software bill and gets great software, top-notch customer service and support, and a software solution that is uniquely installed for your business without any surveillance or breaches of privacy. For example, if you use Google for email, Salesforce for CRM, Slack for team chat, ListMonkey for customer communications, and Airtable for data management, with a team of 10, you'd save $9,000 per year on software costs switching to Federated Computer. And what's wild is the cost of Federated Computer doesn't grow as your team grows. You can use your Federated Computer savings to grow your business rather than feed the woke Silicon Valley software companies. The Federated Computer team invented computing in the cloud. Now they're taking a hammer to the ridiculously high prices of business software and have many, many satisfied customers to prove they deliver. Federated Computer has been a longtime supporter of the Tom Woods Show, and they're offering 30% off their already low prices when you use coupon code WOODS. Go to www.federated.computer to begin to save 75% or more on your monthly software costs. That's www.federated.computer. Don't forget coupon code WOODS. These folks are going to do you a big, big favor. Check them out. One of the points that J.D. Vance has been making is that there's no plausible path to victory for Ukraine. So that has to factor into people's conversations about it. No matter how they feel about the matter sentimentally, there's no path to victory. And he's saying that even my critics aren't even pointing to one. I'm not even sure what exactly it is. They think we're just going to keep doing the same thing and somehow that's going to turn things around. Well,
yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that's including with American financial and military support to the nth degree. Never mind not including it, right? And it goes to show exactly the complete bankruptcy of the bad guys' position on this, Tom. And by the bad guys, I mean the American War Party. And you can find, of course, Bill Kristol and David Frum and Gary Kasparov and all of these people saying, oh, you're abandoning Ukraine to their fate and all of this stuff. None of them even pretend to have an explanation for how this thing could ever be turned around. We tried sanctions and we tried pouring in weapons. None of them have the courage to propose that, not that they would go themselves ever, but to even propose that we send the 82nd Airborne or the 101st or the U.S. Navy with its cruisers to shell Russian positions in the Azov coast. And nobody's saying that. That's insane. We're not doing that. And the Germans and the French and the Poles and the Lithuanians, they're not fielding land armies in Ukraine. And they couldn't without America to coordinate it all and run the whole thing for them anyway. And so those are the facts of life. The war is lost. There is absolutely nothing they can do. And then, so what are these warmongers like Bill Kristol and it's Neil. You got to pronounce it Neil Ferguson. Like you're being knighted by the British Empire to represent their interests and call yourself a proud American patriot. He has no argument for how to turn this thing around. I debated Wesley Clark, the former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO forces in Europe, 4-star general on Piers Morgan's show. And I said, look, the Ukrainians' clock has already been cleaned. What are we even arguing about here? And Clark resorted to, but you shouldn't say that. This is the same thing that J.D. Vance was responding to Richard Hanania.
Oh, yeah. Can I read that? I have it right on my screen. I have it right on my screen. So Richard Hanania was shooting back at something that J.D. Vance was saying to Neil Ferguson. And so the thing that Hanania quotes is Vance saying, is he aware of the reality on the ground of the numerical advantage of the Russians, of the depleted stock of the Europeans, or their even more depleted industrial base? And then Hanania's response is, this is just a very weird posture to start with in negotiations, that your side is weak and the other is strong. Even if true, is it good to telegraph to the other side, this is how you're thinking about the issues? Would Trump negotiate a business deal this way, starting off by telling the other side they have all the leverage? And Vance responds, you're right. Russia was completely ignorant of the battlefield condition of the war until I posted about it. I mean, he really is on fire with this.
Yeah. And I mean, I've been putting up with the same stuff too. And that was what Wesley Clark had said to me, was that, listen, that may be true, but we shouldn't talk that way and show that we understand the position of weakness that we're in here, because that just makes it harder to negotiate. And then, of course, my answer is, I think the Russians know where their troops are on the ground there, and the reality of that. Nobody's picking that up from me.
Right.
So, in fact, I gave a speech in Denver the night before Vance talked about that, and I had a bit in my speech about that exact thing. And then that he got in that exchange the next day. And so it just goes to show the absolute bankruptcy of their position here. They have no argument about how Ukraine is supposed to win the war. And then they say, okay, you're right that Ukraine's lost the war, but you just shouldn't say that. So at that point, what are we even talking about? We need to just make a deal and cut and run. That's it.
Well, the quote unquote argument that they have is the one they always have in this situation. It's Neville Chamberlain again.
Right.
You know, it's 1930s appeasement, and Trump is the appeaser. I mean, yeah.
You know what? If Adolf Hitler had possessed 6,000 hydrogen bombs and the means to deliver them to the United States of America, we'd have had to make a deal with him. I don't know what to tell you.
That's the situation they're in.
That's the situation we're in. And
yeah.
Putin is not Hitler. He is not a rampaging lunatic, you know, in any of that sense. He's a strong man. He's an autocrat of sorts, right? But he's not a czar, and he's not a dictator. He's not a king, and he's not a wild man. He's essentially a technocrat, and has always been extremely cautious in foreign policy.
But
not
didn't
always.
Didn't Nikki Haley say something like, he even said that as soon as he wins in Ukraine, he's going on to Poland, and he's going on. He even said it, but where?
No, he never did. And in fact, you know, they always quote him saying, whoever doesn't miss the Soviet Union has no heart. Or even they're just paraphrasing. He says he misses the Soviet Union, whatever. But even if they quote it, they leave out the second half of the sentence. They just stop at the comma. It's not even the next sentence. It's the rest of the sentence. He says, anyone who doesn't miss the Soviet Union has no heart. Anyone who wants it back has no brain. That's what he says. And in fact, the speech, as I demonstrate in the book, and I cite all these academics who studied it in depth, the speech is about how, boy, Russia was in a really bad place, but I already succeeded in saving it. Aren't I a great leader? That's what the speech is about. It's a whole, like, you know, the academic guy, one of these academics I quote, calls it a decline and renewal trope. That's what the speech is. And so he's saying, boy, were we down bad, huh, guys? But we're sure doing great now. That's all he was talking about. He wasn't saying the first implication about even taking back that city. Was it Neva in eastern Estonia? That's like always been a Russian city. He wasn't even saying that. He wasn't even saying, yeah, we're going to take back the Donbass and Novorossiya and the land bridge to Crimea. He wasn't talking about that at all. He was just running for re-election at that time or whatever, and bragging about all of his great successes and saving the ruble and whatever, gaining
Scott,
respect from W. Bush.
Need we even point out that there are a lot of members of the American intelligentsia who had a lot of things to say about the Soviet Union that were reasonably favorable, or that Eric Foner, who was in the Columbia University History Department when I was there, Eric Foner wrote an article around the time that the Baltic states were breaking off from the Soviet Union, and he was saying what the Soviet Union needs now is a Lincoln, an Abraham Lincoln, to keep it together. Now, did he lose any of his stature as like one of the great historians of America? The thought would never occur to anybody. You'd be a McCarthyite even to suggest it. So it's almost like there's like a double standard or something here.
Yeah, there certainly is. You know, of Robert Kagan, I like to quote this. It's in the end of the book. Spoiler alert, everybody. At the end of the book, Robert Kagan goes, you know, well, we don't even need to do this at all. Who cares about Ukraine? Ukraine has this is Victoria Nuland's husband I'm talking about, Bill Kristol's writing partner, when they wrote the toward a neo-Reaganite foreign policy in 1996, inaugurating the doctrine of benevolent global hegemony, they called it, co-founder of the Project for a New American Century, architect of Iraq War II, leading neoconservative intellectual, you know, right up there at, you know, with Norman Podhoretz and the very like highest class, most respected of the neoconservatives. And he says, you know what? Ukraine always belonged to Russia and we never cared. And throughout the entire 45 years of the Soviet Union and the Cold War, it never mattered to us that Russia dominated Ukraine. And Kagan says, Tom, and those were the good old days. We consider the good old days. And I'm sorry, I don't consider all of Eastern Europe enslaved under communist terror state totalitarianism to be the good old days at all. But he's certainly right that it is not worth risking conflict with Russia over who controls what's called Novorossiya, because it belonged to them. Little Russia, it belonged to them since the days of Catherine the Great. In fact, Crimea, she took Crimea from the Turks in war in 1783, the same year that America made peace with Britain to end the Revolutionary War, 4 years before our Constitution was ratified. And the only reason that that land had belonged to Crimea at all was because Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, the General Secretary of the Soviet Union, had drawn the line there. And the only reason that was in 1921. And does that sound like some sacred dictate from heaven or something? And then Khrushchev, Stalin's sidekick, then gifted in a drunken celebration, gave Crimea to Ukraine only in 1954, after the Second World War, almost 10 years later, 9 years later, after the Second World War, in order to shore up support from the Ukrainian Communist Party for his right to succeed Stalin in power again as General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. So who cares what he says? It could be dangerous if every nation on earth starts trying to revise their borders violently. But you know what? This is all Obama's fault anyway. So whatever, man. Certainly we could draw the line where it is now. Russia's taken virtually all of 2 provinces and about half of another 2. They've secured their so-called land bridge to Crimea, including guaranteed the freshwater resources from the Dnieper River to the Crimean Peninsula. And so, damn Putin if he does not shake hands with Donald Trump and put an end to this thing right now with the opportunity that's being given to him. Enough is enough already.
Well, let me tell you something, everybody. I brought this book all the way with me to use as a visual aid in this episode, even though I'm about to spend a week on a cruise ship. And so I've added like an extra 10 pounds to my luggage going on board, just so that I could use this as a visual aid. So therefore, according to, I don't know what kind of logic, you have to go buy one of these. And you can find Provoked anywhere. And of course, I'm linking to it in the video description as well as at tomwoods.com/2611. You can click on that, go get your copy of Provoked. I mean, look, I know that peer pressure is not an argument, or that a lot of people are doing something that's not an argument. But the fact is, everybody in our world is reading this book right now. Everybody's reading it. So who are you to resist that trend here? Okay. And I'm saying this to a room full of individualists out there, but who are you to resist this trend? Okay.
John Mearsheimer called it manna from heaven.
Yeah. Okay. Now, how about that? Who would reject manna from heaven, right? Nobody.
There you go. That's right.
Check out Provoked. Scott Horton, thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.